the hearing for the Finance Committee, and we'll then go into recess. We have some members running late. We want to make sure everybody arrives and gets to vote on these 6 bills that we have before us. I don't think it's too controversial. Some of the bills were unanimous, so out of the division, so I don't think we'll have a lot of discussion. So hopefully, we'll take a 30-minute recess to wait for the arrival of some of our members that either left early or left late or told us they couldn't make it on time. So, yeah, right. So we are in recess. I hope to return by about 10:30. Thank you. recess. I'm told that Representative Bean is on his way. And we'll begin with, we have 6 bills on the docket for today, beginning with Division 1. I'll recognize Representative Leishman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. I'd just like to turn this over to Representative McGuire, who will speak briefly to the unanimous decision of the division to retain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to move to retain Senate Bill 128.
Okay.
So this is a bill that moves spending for legal services for those who are involuntarily committed for mental care. From the spending is currently in the Health and Human Services Department. This moves it to the Judicial Council. And when we heard the testimony on the bill, it was extremely lukewarm, I would say. You know, the motivation for doing this, you know, the sponsor didn't show up. The motivation for doing it was somewhat unclear. And Representative Griffin pointed out that it's possible that when this item is part of Health and Human Services, that there's matching funds available in that under that venue. But if it were moved to Judicial Council, it's possible that there would not be, right? It's likely that there would not be in that case. So, you know, this could be a significant cost increase for what seemed to us to be not really a strong benefit. And so we really want to make sure, and no one from Health and Human Services came to talk to us, so we really want to make sure that that's not the case before we let this go. So we need more information, and that's why we're retaining him.
Further discussion? Representative Hole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, do those who are committed today have access to legal services? It's just funded, just for clarity, right? It's just funded through DHHS instead?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And for those not familiar with Judicial Council, we start off with very little in their budget. They come to fiscal for all their needs, and they come almost every meeting as money is needed to hire the indigent counsel and so on. So it'd be the same thing. Representative Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also heard from the Judicial Council, and the estimated number of cases here runs somewhere from 2,200 to 2,500 plus. And the Judicial Council right now consists of 3 people, and they said they would be absolutely overwhelmed to take on the added caseload. So that was another major reason for retaining the bill.
Further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to retain Senate Bill 128. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll on motion to retain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Leon for Representative Burr.
Yes.
Representative McGuire. Dan.
Yes.
Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Bean is not here. Representative Hole.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire for
Yes.
Representative Cambros. Representative Popovici Muller.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
Yes.
Representative Nalgren.
Yes.
Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative, I'm sorry, we have another replacement, Representative Grassi.
Yes.
Okay, Representative Hewitt.
Yes.
Representative Heath,
Yes.
Representative Murray,
Yes.
Representative Ebel,
Yes.
Representative Twelerski,
Yes.
Representative Haken Phillips,
Yes.
Representative Stringham,
Yes.
and Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 24 to nothing in the affirmative to retain.
Okay. Vote being 24-0, the bill will be retained. And no bill report is required other than to have it listed as retained. All right. Again, recognize Representative Leishman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize Representative McGuire that will be offering an amendment 2080 for the division.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to move Amendment 2080H, and I'll speak to my motion. Does this need a second? So Senate Bill 204 is directs the state to put trauma kits into state-owned buildings. A trauma kit is like a specialized first aid kit that's specifically designed to help someone who is massively bleeding very quickly. So it contains two main elements. One is a tourniquet, and one is what's called an Israeli compression bandage. It's a very large bandage that puts pressure on a large wound. And so, and the kit has a few other things, but that's the main thing. It's for use when the EMTs are a little too far away to help someone who's significantly bleeding. And the amendment makes a few improvements to the bill. For one thing, the bill was originally specified state-owned buildings, but we have a lot of buildings that are state-occupied, particularly things like liquor stores and other buildings that are leased, and those could benefit from having these kind of kits as well, so we added that. The original bill had a section that was a little bit overkill. We felt it created a committee of EMTs to create a list of buildings and so on. But it turns out the people that normally deal with facilities and buildings is the Department of Administrative Services. So we changed the bill to have the Department of Administrative Services handle the distribution and purchasing and distribution of the kits, and let them consult with the emergency services section of safety. And then the final thing was the money. The bill originally simply had a dedicated fund that it could accept gifts and grants, but it didn't actually put any money in the fund, so therefore it wouldn't have acquired the kits until such gifts and grants showed up. But the amount of money here is relatively small, so we changed it to eliminate the dedicated fund and to allocate $50,000 for the purpose. That should get us somewhere around 250 buildings supplied, and so if necessary to go from there, then future budgets could allocate more money for this.
Any questions on the amendment? Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Line 30, right? Section does not apply to state-owned buildings that is vacant or under construction. Should that be broader than just vacant? We discussed earlier, maybe things like at the Sununu Center, their storage buildings. Is that under vacant?
Yeah,
How are we defining vacant, I guess?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a line that's unchanged from the amendment. Just for clarity, is a replace all, but this particular line is unchanged from the original bill, and basically these kits are most useful when there's a lot of people around, right? So places that are vacant or otherwise rarely used, it's less useful.
Representative Edwards and Representative Carol McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few, but I'll just go at your leisure. The first thing I'm curious about is this is a very small list of medical items that would be in there, and it's mostly stop the bleeding kinds of things. Are there any of these components that have an expiration date, that they have a term at which they need to be rotated? And did you give consideration for those on who would be having unexpired items in this kit and who would be responsible for rotating the stock and how the old stuff would get disposed? Was there any thought about that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Representative. That did come up in our committee, and we learned that these have a shelf life of 3 to 5 years. Some of the items in the kit are one-time use only. So like the tourniquet, for example, once you use it, you need a new one. But because this requirement is sort of a new requirement for DAS and their property services area, this would be an ongoing thing that they would have to keep track of. We didn't explicitly put in the bill, obviously this is something they would end up putting in their budget, right? So when they need to replace and all that sort of thing.
Follow up.
And then was there any estimate of how many times this might have been useful over the last 10 years in all state buildings? Is there any consumption rate assumption built into here?
No, we did not hear that. The only thing related to that we heard is that, and this was from the EMTs, that there were basically two sorts of conditions that happen that the EMTs can't get there quick enough. One of them is this, severe bleeding, and the other one is heart attacks, and that's why we have these AEDs, the defibrillators, right? And so both of those are starting to get spread through the community in various ways. But this is, we did not hear about specific, cases or something,
And so was there discussion, I think with the AEDs, that comes with a sort of an annual requirement for people to become familiar with that equipment. Was there anything in this bill or your amendment to require stop the bleeding training?
Yes, thank you for the question. No, there's requirement in here specifically for instruction material to be in the kit, but there isn't a requirement for training.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to end up being the only person voting no on this, just because of my healthcare background in the Army. I just don't see this as being practical in terms of being able to implement it and achieve it's a great intent, but I just don't see it being practical. But thank you.
Well, some of these things could go in rules or in a bill next year. Representative Carol McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill went through my committee first, and we got an estimate that the first wave of kits would cost something in the vicinity of $5,000 to $10,000, depending on how much of a deal we could get for buying them in quantity, and that it was the cheapest and easiest way to prevent the third major cause of death in New Hampshire, which is bleeding out. So we were informed that if you call 911, all of the dispatchers are fully trained in how to use these kits, so you don't have to say, well, where's the instructions? What do I do now? The use of these kits is also taught in CPR and first aid and other places, so it's not as rare as you might think. And so we thought that even if it prevented one death from a tragic accident, someone coming in and deciding to shoot up the DMV or something like that, we said, okay, this might prevent a death at a very cheap price. And it's something that the the buildings can keep on hand. It doesn't go bad. The expiration date on things like latex gloves, I mean, you could still use them after they've expired, I imagine. It's not as critical as some other things that you have to replace immediately. So that was why we thought it was getting an awful lot of bang for a very little amount of money.
Well, we're glad you're here to add that. Representative Griffin.
When the EMTs were asked the question that Representative Edwards raised, they said the most important thing is if someone's on the phone with 911, that this equipment be available, because the people on 911 are trained to tell people over the phone how to use the equipment.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The availability of these materials are definitely important. I have a friend who lost his leg in combat, and on his prosthetic, he actually keeps the trauma kit bungeed on so that if somebody else is in a similar situation, he has the tools on board. So having these available for people should they be needed is I think, a low-cost way to provide necessary tools.
Further discussion on Amendment 2080. Everyone has a copy. Is a show of hands sufficient to adopt it? All those in favor of adopting Amendment 2080? Hands down. Anyone opposed? It is unanimous. The motion before us now is ought to pass as amended. Motion by Representative McGuire, second by Representative Griffin, ought to pass as amended on House Bill, Senate Bill 204. The clerk will call the roll.
That's Dan McGuire, or who made the motion, Mr. Chair?
Dan McGuire, seconded by Representative Griffin.
Very good. Representative Leon,
Yes.
Representative McGuire.
Yes.
Dan. Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
No.
Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Hole.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Popovici Muller.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
Yes.
Representative Norgren.
Yes.
Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative Grassi.
Yes.
Representative Hewitt.
Yes.
Representative Heath.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Ebel.
Yes.
Representative Telersky.
Yes.
Representative Haken Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Stringham.
Yes.
And Representative Weiler.
Yes.
There will not be a minority report.
Okay, what do we do? What happened here? 23 to 1.
Should be 24 to 1.
I'm sorry, 24 to 1. My numbers are right. I just called it wrong.
I recognize Representative Leishman for Senate Bill 267.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize Representative Ebel to speak to the division's vote to retain of 7 to 1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. SB 267 is a little bit complicated to understand. Perhaps it helps if you know that it started out life as a bill that would have required DES to issue regulations on advanced recycling, which you may remember that process from last year that we passed. In conversations in the Senate, it was decided that perhaps what one should look at is the cumulative impact of a bill that was, say, emitting polluted air. Because the way permitting works right now, in permitting by DES, you're basically just looking at what potential sources of pollution are being emitted by that particular facility being permitted as opposed to the cumulative impacts of other facilities in the area. So this bill, which passed with a very, very strong vote on the House floor and 19-0 coming out of E&A, would have required the Commissioner of DES to consider a cumulative impacts analysis in rules and statutes, and it would have authorized the hiring of someone to sort of look at existing rules and statutes, and it was going to authorize a scoping study. And the ultimate idea was that the analysis would recommend any rules and potential legislation to require us to look at cumulative impacts of any facility that was permitted. In discussions in the division, we talked a little bit about what the word facility meant in the bill. We talked some more about cumulative impacts, and overall, we felt like we really needed to look at it longer, and so we decided to retain the bill.
Who made the second?
I did.
McGuire, thank you. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the motion is to retain. Clerk will call the roll on the motion to retain on Senate Bill 267.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Leon,
Yes.
Representative Dan McGuire,
Yes.
Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin,
Yes.
Representative Mooney,
Yes.
Representative Edwards,
Yes.
Representative Bean,
Yes.
Representative Hole,
Yes.
Representative Sweeney,
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire,
Yes.
Representative Popovici Muller,
Yes.
Representative Wallner,
Yes.
Representative Norgren,
Yes.
Representative Leishman,
Yes.
Representative Bucco,
Yes.
Representative Grassi,
No.
Representative Hewitt,
Yes.
Representative Heath,
Yes.
Representative Murray,
Yes.
Representative Ebel,
Yes.
Representative Telersky,
Yes.
Representative Hakins Phillips,
Yes.
Representative Stringham,
Yes.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 24-1.
Motion is, the committee report is adopted and we'll get I'm sure you've got the report written out. No, there is no report required. Thank you. Moving on to Division 3, I'll recognize, and thank you very much, Division 1, for your work. Moving on to Division 3, there is no Division 2 bills. Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move OTP on Senate Bill 172 and could take a moment to speak to my motion.
Say that number again. I think it's
It-
182.
It's listed as 182, but the real number is 172.
Thank you for the
A-
correction.
A rare typo.
Second on 172.
And this is an amendment?
No, it's an actual bill.
It's ought to pass.
OTP, yes, sir.
Okay, continue.
And second?
For those who have not looked at this bill, this is essentially extending the eligibility for aid to families with dependent children and spending TANF money so that we can support court-appointed guardians when they step in to fulfill the role of a long list of people who are currently eligible. If you looked at line 9, you would see that current eligibility extends to fathers, mothers, grandfathers, grandmothers, brothers, sisters, stepfathers, stepmothers, stepbrothers, stepsisters, first cousins, nephews or niece, uncles, aunts, and it adds court-appointed guardian. This seems to be a very reasonable extension of eligibility requirements, and I would recommend OTP yes.
Motion is ought to pass. Motion by Edwards, second by Mooney on Senate Bill 172. Further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? The clerk will call the roll on the motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 172.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Leon.
Yes.
Representative McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Hole.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Popovici Muller.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
Yes.
Representative Norgren.
Yes.
Representative Leishman.
Yes.
Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative Grassi.
Yes.
Representative Hewitt.
Yes.
Representative Heath.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Ebel.
Yes.
Representative Slorsky.
Yes.
Representative Haken Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Stringham.
Yes.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 25-0 in the affirmative.
Thank you. And Representative Edwards, have you had a report written?
That'll be easy to do. I'll have it before I leave.
Thank you.
Unless Representative Mooney already has one.
Moving on.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move SB 239 to retain, and I'd like to speak to my motion.
Second.
Edwards moves, Mooney seconds, that Senate Bill 239 be retained. Speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a friendly retention effort. I've reached out to Senator Waters, who came in and testified on this bill, and I've talked to a few other people. This bill does a couple of new things, or three new things that cause some concern, and an interest in more precision. The first thing it does, from my perspective, that causes concern is on page 4, lines 20, 21, and 22, where we have had a prohibition in our current law. Should I stop, Mr. Chair?
Say again?
Should I stop, or you?
No, he's just getting some,
Oh.
sorry to interrupt.
No. I just want to follow your lead. So what this does is, in the current law, we have had a prohibition on using state money to pay for needle exchanges. So there have been some exception cases where we've specifically authorized state money for needle exchanges, but this would get rid of sort of the blanket prohibition on use of state money. And I think we want to take a deeper look at that and see what the implications of having state money spent in that manner would be. My instinct says it's not good, but there will be a committee put together, a small work group, led by, I've asked Dr. David Nagel, who's a national expert on opioid reduction and harm reduction, to have him come in and basically take the intellectual lead on this. There are a few other people. I'm waiting for Senator Waters to come in and nominate somebody. The other two things it does is it introduces kind of a new concept in New Hampshire law related to reduction, or harm reduction rather. And this is a poorly defined term that got fixed a little bit in HHS before it went to the House. But talking to some folks who participated in that process, they're still not comfortable that we've got the harm reduction right. And just as a kind of a personal story, I think we're about 10 to 15 years behind Europe on the harm reduction efforts. I used to travel to Amsterdam a lot, and they decided to follow a harm reduction program. And the town of Amsterdam and key tourist areas just became profligate with open air use of drugs and narcotics, even though they were trying to go a harm reduction route. So I just want to make sure that this subgroup really makes sure that the definition and boundaries on what harm reduction truly means is defined, because in San Francisco it includes safe injection sites where people can go and get illicit drugs injected into them. I don't think that's consistent with New Hampshire culture. So, but we'll look at that. And then the third thing it does is it imposes a minimal requirement on new training for all licenses related to controlled prescription health and safety programs. I'd like to see that in context. You know, how much training are they already being mandated to take, and what is the impact of requiring 3 more hours, and is 3 the right number? Should it be 1 or 2 or something else? So I think there's some real work. This is, like I said, this is all friendly. You know, the idea of having less harm done in our society is a good one. I think we can all subscribe to, but I really would recommend that we look before we leap. And I know this is going to be a tight vote, but I would ask for your yes vote on the retained motion.
Thank you. Further discussion, Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that great breakdown of some of the challenges with the current structure of this bill. In Health and Human Services, we did do a lot of work in order to try and refine the definition of harm reduction, and it's absolutely critical to make sure that we get that right. There was some great work done to make sure that people at end of life or with chronic pain were not wrapped up in some of the drug use mitigation efforts, because for some people, opiates are the correct choice, and truly the reducing harm is by making sure that they have appropriate access. As we worked through it, there were a lot of challenges that conceptually Health and Human Services knew that this was a good idea to start working towards, but financially we need to make sure that we understand the consequences, because harm reduction has been drawn very, very broadly in other states. We did a good first effort in defining it here, but before we open up more funding and more state funding, we need to make sure that our other harm reduction efforts that we sent over, such as the drug checking, to make sure that people who are using street drugs can make sure that the cannabis they purchase isn't laced with fentanyl, where a woman in my district has now lost her son. That we make sure our entire harm reduction efforts come together to make sure that not only state-funded harm reduction, but those of people taking initiative are embraced is absolutely critical, because harm reduction isn't just one approach. This is why we're working so hard on the definition, and we need to enable people all throughout the state to reduce harm. So thank you. I'd support a retained motion.
Representative Stringham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SB 239 was a highly supported bill in the House after a lengthy floor discussion led by Dr. Nagel. The bill passed overwhelmingly. There are no financial appropriations in this bill. Therefore, any reasons for retaining the bill are related to policy, not financing at this point. The floor debate was very persuasive. The vote of the House clear and no financial impact. I'm going to vote against the motion to retain, and I urge you all to join me. But thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Further discussion, Representative Tulerski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make one clarification. At the hearing with the senator, who's the prime sponsor, he was asked directly, would this bill fund safe injection sites? And the answer was no, absolutely not. This bill does not support safe injection sites. It is not in the bill as allowable. So I just wanted to clarify that. I will be joining my colleague voting against this. I believe this bill will actually save lives, and I think it's unfortunate that it potentially could be held until next year.
Further discussion. Seeing none, you ready for the question? The clerk will call the roll on the motion to retain on Senate Bill 239.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Leon,
Yes.
Representative McGuire,
Yes.
Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Hole.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Popovici Muller.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
No.
Representative Norgren.
No.
Representative Leishman.
No.
Representative Bucco.
No. No.
Representative Grassi.
No.
Representative Hewitt.
No.
Representative Heath.
No.
Representative Murray.
No.
Representative Ebel.
No.
Representative Tolarski.
No.
Representative Haken Phillips.
No.
Representative Stringham.
No.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 to 12.
Motion is adopted. Moving on to Senate Bill 263, Representative Edwards.
I would like to move that we retain SB 263, and I'd like to speak to that motion.
Second.
Thank you. You are recognized, Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of the commission that looked at the Granite State Advantage Program, and am already on record on that report as approving the Granite Advantage Healthcare Program and its extension, I would just like to point out that that report did not specify a length of time at which for which the program should be repealed or extended. So it was silent on that. And so there has been a lot of discussion on it. The initial House position was 2. The initial Senate position was forever. Current bill before us essentially says forever. We put this item into HB2 so that it could be better discussed. It's my understanding that there's a rapidly developing consensus around a sunset of 6 or 7 years. I won't put my thumb on that too much, but so there is no doubt we want to take this to another 5-year contract, and that's how we get to 6 or 7. If you recognize that we need 1 year to get to the new contract, and that every contract in Medicaid wants to be a 5-year contract, that's 6. So the argument for the 7th year is I think a rational one, where it would be good to be able to add the option in the contract of extending it for 1 more year, just in case we have some turbulence towards the end of the contract where the legislature needs to be more clear. So why bother with the sunset? You all have heard this before. We know that the legislation that's already in effect says that if the federal government backs off of its current 90% match level, that gives us the potential to get out of the program. But the current law does not talk about changes in eligibility. So so if the federal government, who I don't think we have any business trusting to keep their promises, changes something, I think it's incumbent upon us today and with this legislature to give us a future legislature a graceful way out. If this is a good program, if the feds surprise us and keep their promises, then I suspect this program will be easily extended. And if not, it can be easily exited. So the motion is basically, let's retain 263 and let the HB2 item be worked out between the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. If I were to bet, I would bet that they would agree on either 6 or 7 years, which ought to give us all confidence that we're going to be taking care of the healthcare needs of New Hampshire.
Further discussion? Representative Stringham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SB 263 passed in the House by a wide margin and unanimously in the Senate, 24-0. It provides for permanently reauthorization of the widely supported Granite Advantage program, which sunsets December 31st, 2023 by current law. Retaining the bill won't help us if we bring it back here after January 1st when the program has expired. The retention of the bill is principally in favor of the Budget House B2 program extension, which currently is 2 years. In our view, the non-arbitrary calendar triggers in the existing bill that safeguard future budgets are adequate. And adding another calendar trigger is not necessary, and in fact, could be harmful to the program itself and create inefficiencies during any reauthorization or recontracting that may come up. We'll have plenty of opportunities to challenge the program, modify the program if the federal government changes its mind without a calendar trigger. Therefore, I think we should continue to make our intent known of keeping this program in place, which is serving our constituents so well. There's nothing graceful about a time trigger, 2 years from now, 6 years from now, or 7 years from now. So for these reasons, I'm going to vote against this motion to retain so a better motion could be brought forward.
Further discussion? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In all the discussion on this bill that we had on the House floor and here today, it's been talked about as a great, program and strong and so on. And but there is a downside to this, and I'd like to at least mention it. This program has very poor incentives. The structure of it is all wrong from my point of view. I'm a part owner of a restaurant, and our experience in the restaurant was that in the old days, when we wanted people to work extra hours, they were very willing to do so, right? They wanted to earn more money and so on. But today, even though we have roughly the same number of employees that we had prior to the pandemic, they are working many, many fewer hours because they're well aware that programs like this have a cliff. And if they work too much, they lose their eligibility for this kind of a program. And so therefore, when we ask people, please, can you work, an extra evening or an extra whatever, they say, no, I can't, because all of a sudden I would lose this particular benefit. And so this program, is well-intentioned, but I think it needs, if possible, to be restructured in such a way that there's not a cliff, but a ramp, so that people, it doesn't disincentivize work. We are no longer able to, we used to be open for lunch and dinner every day. Now we are only open for lunch a few days a week because we simply can't get enough people to work. It's that simple. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your remarks and your observation. I didn't mention it in my intro, but I sort of feel accountable, as maybe all of us should, that while the Granite State Advantage program has been in place, there hasn't been an effort to go and work through the details of what an alternative ought to look like. And so this was a major observation on my part. Well, damn, how come we haven't been working on something that's better than this? And we just didn't. So my commitment to you would be if I'm still around in 8 years, that you can feel the shudder run through the room. But if I will have tried to get the smart people like you and others together to figure out what the future might look like, so that when this bill is coming towards termination, maybe before then, that we show up with something. And my sort of attitude is you can't beat something with nothing. And this is something, and we don't have anything. So I think there's some work to be done, and hopefully we can talk about that.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking back to our last session, there had been a very good effort in order to try and discuss some of the challenges around the program and why it's important to have a sunset. But unfortunately, a lot of those discussions were not permitted. This program provides a very valuable benefit for people. However, if we were to move to a permanent extension with no sunset, that would continue to shift the whole landscape in this country around healthcare. As it stands, there are a few states who have not adopted expanded Medicaid at all. And when you look to the national level, I'm with the National Council of State Legislatures on some of the healthcare policy teams. And when there's a shift, and if all of the states are on board, there will be more shifts in the Medicaid expansion world in DC, because we're moving to a much more controlled healthcare system. And when those holdouts move to Medicaid expansion, there are going to be more shifts in the healthcare system. As more and more states have permanent Medicaid expansion, that further shifts the discussion on a national level. By having reauthorization periodically here in New Hampshire, we have a better check on what happens in Washington, D.C., regardless of who is in power there. One party or the other, there's always going to be changes that may not be a benefit to the people of New Hampshire. So needing to reauthorize it is absolutely critical. That's one of those areas that helps to keep our cost under containment by having these discussions. And I think that it's very important that we retain it. This language is in the budget. I fully support the efforts that are moving forward in the budget, and I believe we will come to a good compromise for the people of New Hampshire, and this program will continue. I think that a vote to retain this is a vote of confidence in us passing a budget in the House, because assuming we pass a budget, this is unnecessary because it's already going to be continued for the people of New Hampshire. And I quite honestly think that saying that this bill needs to continue so that we don't meet the cliff is a vote of no confidence in the budget. And I was really hoping we could continue this bipartisan effort to work for the people of New Hampshire and bring the solutions that they're asking for forward. So I'll be voting to retain.
Thank you. Further discussion? Representative Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Peachy Miller.
I just wanted to very quickly comment on an earlier statement made by a distinguished colleague that said that the bill had broad support. It was broadly supported. I didn't want to just let my recollection, and I checked the results, and the OTP motion had 189 votes from the Democrats, 4 from the Republicans out of 400 people. I think it's important when we use broad support to maybe at least wait until it gets over 200 out of 400 before we call it that. So it was a narrow vote, and the House had every right to vote that way, and I see the results, but I don't consider that a broad mandate from the House. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 263 FN. Representative Hewitt.
Mr. Chairman, I'm also going to vote in opposition to this bill. Talking about whether people will work harder if you put a work requirement in. The reason I think that in most cases, at least today, when it comes to health care, that the reason that people are unwilling to work a lot of extra hours is that the remuneration for working the extra hours isn't sufficient to make up the difference between what they're going to get in benefits if they get sick as they would get if they're well. And that's a real concern for people, particularly people with small children. And people with small children are people who are frequently involved in the business of a work requirement. The other thing that kind of concerns me is that we're putting a time limit on it. The time limit right now, the deadline is December 31st this year. And talking about how many years out it is or not. The statute that's in effect now expires on December 31st. And whatever position you take on any other aspect of the bill, legally, that's a really important deadline to consider, because you don't have the luxury of retaining and disretaining and going from one thing to the other in order to change things without bearing that firmly in mind. And furthermore, if you put a drop dead provision in, such as the one that's being proposed in connection with the discussion the Republicans have been having had, it's simply another way of saying, well, we're going to end this thing without having to do anything. You don't have to find that there's anything wrong with it in order to stop it if you have a deadline. As far as I can see, there isn't any big push right at the moment for saying that Medicaid Advantage is a bad thing. In fact, the experience around the country is quite the opposite. So I'm going to vote in my conscience to make sure that the Medicaid expansion continues and is available to people for so long as it does a job that does not require people to vote it down. Thank you.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the previous representative speaking for his remarks. I think that there's a lot of confusion about what a Medicaid expansion actually is. If you are somebody with young children, you are not actually eligible for Medicaid expansion because you are on traditional Medicaid. When we had received different feedback, we had received feedback from people in the disability community. However, people on disability are on traditional Medicaid, not Medicaid expansion. This is yet one more example about how misunderstood this program is and how it requires the ongoing review of the legislature to make sure that we continue to do things right for the people of the state, because we do things the New Hampshire way, not the DC way.
Further discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 263. Representative Stringham.
I thank my colleagues for their comments, and Medicaid expansion has done a lot for closing the contract between those who are doing everything they can to take care of themselves and be productive members of society, but not be shut out of the healthcare marketplace. I totally agree with comments by our division chair and Representative McGuire that we can make this program better. I still don't think having a calendar-based trigger does anything to do that. I think we should do that by taking the limited energies that we have to do things by talking and putting together bills that make this program even more effective and not retaining this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to retain Senate Bill 263. Seeing none, are you ready for the question? Clerk will call the roll on the motion to retain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Leon.
Yes.
Representative McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Petrie votes yes. Representative Emmerich.
Yes.
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Mooney.
Yes.
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Hole.
Yes.
Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
Representative Carol McGuire.
Yes.
Representative Popovici Muller.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
No.
Representative Norgren.
No.
Representative Leishman.
No.
Representative Bucco.
No.
Representative Grassi.
No.
Representative Hewitt.
No.
Representative Heath.
No.
Representative Murray.
No.
Representative Ebel.
No.
Representative Telersky.
No.
Representative Haken Phillips.
No.
Representative Stringham.
No.
Representative Weiler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 13 to 12 in favor of the motion.
Okay, the motion 13 to 12, the report will be to retain for Senate Bill 263.
I guess that's not going on consent.
The next meeting is June 8th on Thursday. Is there anyone that won't be able to attend that we know of now? Okay. That's the session. The session will be next Thursday, June 8th.
So Mr. Chair, question?
Yes.
Do you think these motions will be heard and voted on in the next session?
I think we're making the calendar that could go in there, but it's up to the speaker and the clerk what goes on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So it's possible. Anything else to come before this committee? Seeing none, I thank you for your attendance and go out and enjoy this beautiful day. We are adjourned.